Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webcast. My name is Christine Dorsey Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio chapter of the American Planning Association, and I am your webcast moderator. Today is Friday, December 5th, and we will be hearing the presentation, Preserving an Icon, Cleveland's West Side Market Transportation Plan. This is really exciting, mostly because I'm from the Cleveland area and grew up going to the West Side Market and have many close and familiar ties to it. So I'm really excited to have this group here to chat with us about this award-winning market. For technical help during today's webcast, you can type your questions in the Q&A box, and I'll do my best to answer those. And questions for our panelists can also be typed into that Q&A box. We'll get to them at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. We have, I think, one webinar left for the year, and that would be in December 19th. And we're already starting to reserve sessions for 2026. I can't believe it. So you can register for our final session and all of our upcoming sessions on our website, ohioplanning.org/planning webcast. This session has been approved for 1.5 CM credits, but for my AICP friends, I don't think you'll be logging those credits today or tomorrow. With the APA system upgrade, there's been a lot of issues going on. So you will be able to eventually get into your portal to do so. It just might not be today. So again, don't forget to log them at some point. And all of our sessions are worth CM credit. We also have some on-demand sessions available for you to view off of our YouTube channel. Again, just head over to our website to get the link to those YouTube videos for the on-demand CM sessions. We've got the law, the ethics, the equity, sustainability and resilience, whatever else I missed of all of those required credits. So we have them all for you. We gotcha. Lastly, if you also head over to our website, you can join our email list. I send an email out to everyone once a month, just reminding you of what sessions are available for you to register for and links to all the things that you might need. So be sure to head over there and sign up for that and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have well over 500 session recordings all available to you for free. So subscribe and you'll get a notification when new sessions have been uploaded, like this one. Okay, that's the end of my housekeeping items. Again, if you have questions for the panelists, type them in the Q&A box. We'll get to those at the end. And with that, Rosemary, I'm kicking it over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for having me today. We're excited to be here presenting on the West Side Market. Let me get the slideshow going here for all of you. Just wanted to kind of kick it off with a little context. I know folks are from all over who are joining us, and I want to introduce the other two folks who are with me. So Ken Kalinchak is from PMC Finance, and Ken has been a critical piece of the project team here, doing the tax credit financing and helping coordinate the deal structuring for this project that we've been embarking on. And Camille is our development director and partnership whiz, and can kind of answer questions around the mission and some of that work that we're doing. I'm the executive director of Cleveland Public Market Corporation, the nonprofit running West Side Market since 2024. So just to give a little context for those who may not be from Cleveland, West Side Market is one of the most important landmarks in the city and has a very long history in the neighborhood. There are roots dating back to the mid 1800s, where there was always a market at the corner of West 25th and Lorraine. But the building that we currently reside in opened in 1912. It has been a neighborhood anchor in the Ohio City neighborhood, which is adjacent to downtown. And it really has been important in the redevelopment and catalyzing redevelopment in the neighborhood over the last 25 years. And in the last, 5 to 10 years, I think more and more folks have realized that it was the market's turn for redevelopment, that the market's future was at risk, and we needed to think more deeply about it. So in 2022, Mayor Bibb, our current mayor, ran on a variety of strategies, but thinking about the future of West Side Market was one of them. He won and immediately appointed Jessica Trevisano as part of his key leadership team to take on the market and what might happen in the future. So Jessica spent the next couple years working to develop a master plan with community stakeholders, many of whom became the board members to the nonprofit, and together developed a plan that could get the city comfortable, could get the nonprofit comfortable, and the community comfortable with a way to move forward for the market. Just to give a little bit more background on the market, and then I'll go back. The market houses 60 small businesses. It's a top attraction in the community. This year, we're poised to hit 1 million visitors. It has a lot of folks using SNAP and EBT. It's a mix of Cleveland residents who shop there, regional residents, and then about 25 to 30% of folks are outside the region. So it also has tremendous impact more broadly. So as part of the transition, we developed a master plan to kind of think through a number of different things, but one of which was, how do we restore infrastructure or develop infrastructure and operating systems that meet 21st century needs? How do we expand the market's community impact and think about the role it can play in neighborhood food education, entrepreneurship, and neighborhood development more broadly? How do we think about the experiences that people want in neighborhoods and want in communities by reimagining underutilized spaces? How does the market engage with the community? How does the building engage with the community? And finally, a key piece of this, and part of the reason the city was open and interested in this plan, was because the market has been not sustainable in terms of its business model for at least a decade. And so how could we develop a model that allowed the market to operate sustainably and develop new revenue sources so that the market could have another 100 years? So through that master plan, I want to kind of delve in a little bit more deeply. And I know folks here are planning. So, while this is one building, I think my background is also in urban planning. One of the things I loved about the market and what attracted me to this role is that the market is really like a neighborhood all in kind of one site. So you have small business development, you have real estate development. You're thinking about how different spaces, you can see in this photo, we have the large market hall, and then there's two, like a long outbuilding, and there's a courtyard space and an alley. And so how do all of those spaces relate to each other? How do you create an experience, a flow? So really, to me, the market is like a whole neighborhood in one place, and it's just a really concentrated neighborhood and planning project. So that's what attracted me to this role, is kind of getting to do all of those planning elements, getting to do community development in one space. But as you can see for this project, the market has a number of spaces, and I'll kind of run through the physical changes that the master plan is addressing that impact those 4 key areas. So the first, one of the most critical pieces of the transformation project is addressing the infrastructure. On the left, you can see photos of the current conditions of the basement. The basement is really sort of the heart of the operations for many merchants. It's essentially 15,000 square feet of walk-in coolers. It has all of the plumbing, all of the electrical, all of those kinds of things. The coolers date back to the 1950s, so it's really time for us to bring those into the 21st century and to create a space and really compete with other spaces that merchants want to be. So we know that the next generation of butchers and bakers and things like that, they're going to expect space that meets 21st century health codes, that meets 21st century just best practices, where they can have newer equipment and different types of electrical. So the basement represents a huge piece of the project. As you folks who are planners know, there's a lot of things that happen in communities that sometimes set the stage and aren't as visible. So this is a piece of the project that we have to work really hard to tell the story for, because it's all underground. When we spend $25-30 million on this piece of the project, nobody's really going to see it except for the merchants. And so being able to find ways to tell that story and let the community know this is an essential piece of the market, even though you're not seeing the new spaces come together. This space is really critical. In that plan, you saw that there were two arcades, a short end and a long end. Those originally were all home to produce vendors. When the market developed in 1912, there were not really grocery stores. Public markets were a key way that you got your food. And so now in the 21st century, most people coming to the market, unless you lived immediately in the neighborhood, are passing grocery stores and other things. They're coming to the market for the experience. And so we know based on other public markets that have maybe one or two produce merchants left, we're not going to refill both of those arcades with produce merchants. Right now, the arcades have been a little less than 50% full since the pandemic. And we feel really excited that we've been able in Cleveland to preserve the amount of fresh produce that we have in the market. And so they are a key piece of it, but they will get consolidated into one of the arcades. The other arcade will really deliver upon that customer experience, what people crave in neighborhoods, right? People are thinking about public spaces. Where can communities gather? And so same thing at the market. Again, the market was designed as a people mover. How do you get millions of people through the market every year to buy their groceries quickly and efficiently? But now people come to the market because they want the experience. They want to linger. They want to gather. Many people meet up with their extended family. They're coming from all over the city and they want to spend the day or the afternoon gathering. And we have almost no public seating in the market at all. We have one balcony that you can look out over and it's quite beautiful, but it's pretty limited. And there's no traditional tables or anything like that. And so the North Arcade becomes a space that really allows us to provide those experiences that people want in the 21st century. So we'll have 12 prepared food merchants. Again, we're putting those in the prepared food hall because we also have this really historic building, and thinking about how to put infrastructure into that building is really challenging. So the North Arcade becomes prepared food, and then it'll have about 200 seats in it as well for public seating. On the left here, you'll see there's an alleyway between the market hall and the produce arcade. So in the far left of the photo on the left is the market hall, which houses a lot of everything but produce is in the main market hall. And then the arcade is on the right. That space was sort of always just an alley. It was people kept their trash, their boxes would build up. It was sort of utilitarian, but it was also the main connection point between the arcades and the market. So part of what we're doing is we're adding a connector at the front that I'll show you in a second. And then we're going to create a courtyard space where, again, we can have that public seating, we can have gathering spaces, we can do programming, all of those things that people want to see in communities. We're going to bring to the market and, allows us to really think about the future of the market, our impact in the neighborhood. How can we use food to bring people together? How can we have folks who are of diverse backgrounds getting to know each other, and spaces like the courtyard really we see as critical to doing that. You can see this is from West 25th Street, so the main commercial drag. On the right is the market hall, and the left is the produce arcade on that left picture, and then the alley in between. So you can see then in the other picture, the connector going between the two buildings. From a planning perspective, I think some folks might ask, why are you blocking off the courtyard from the community? And I want to be clear, that's not the intention. The reason that space is glass is because it's meant to be a view in and really keep that view shed there. But the connector is really critical for accessibility. One of the other challenges that, I think planners and all of us negotiate in communities that were built hundreds of years ago is how do people of different needs, whether you're pushing strollers or in a wheelchair, how do you access spaces more easily? And so this connector is a really critical piece of that. Right now, folks who are in the arcade have to negotiate 3 sets of doors. They have to negotiate 3 different levels of concrete and curbs just to get from one area of the market to the other. Not to mention have 4 or 5 bags of groceries that you're trying to carry to the parking lot, which is all the way at the behind the market, so not nearby. and you're having to go through, the snow or sleet or rain or all other kinds of conditions in the winter. And so this really becomes an essential element to making the market a more accessible and welcoming space to people of diverse mobilities. In the market hall, as you can see, we have really a stunning building, one of the most beautiful, I think, public market buildings in the U.S. But that building also creates challenges. Again, there's no public seating. It's very hard to put infrastructure into it. And so part of our project has been thinking about how do you put HVAC into this historic building? How do you create public seating? And so on the photo on the right, you'll see there's a mezzanine which matches the other balcony on the other side that gets us seating while respecting the historic element of the building. And then you'll see actually in that right-hand photo on top, there's like a little green bar through the middle of those stands, and that's how we're adding HVAC to the building. So we're kind of using the existing infrastructure to quietly add those kinds of elements in. Finally, behind that mezzanine that we're adding, this is where we're talking about underutilized spaces. We all can think about whether it's a neighborhood or a building, those spaces and communities that could be so much more than they are right now, whether it's a plaza or, just like a community gathering space in the middle of a commercial corridor. And so this men's locker room really represents that to the market. It's this space that, served a purpose. Men used to come to the market dressed in their suits. They'd change into their butchering clothes and then they'd change back into their suits. That does not happen in the 21st century anymore. And so this gives us the opportunity to generate a space that is a gathering space, a mission-oriented space where we can do programming, and a revenue-generating space. So again, thinking about how do we balance, preserving fresh food merchants who will never be able to pay enough rent to sustain a historic building like this. Where can we drive new revenue sources? And so this event space becomes a critical place to do that, but it also creates a really important community gathering space where we can do all of those things that leverage the market, thinking about food access or programs around entrepreneurship or gathering school children who are in the building to talk about nutrition and do some education. So we're excited about that space as well. And then finally, the women's locker room, which is much smaller, will become a teaching kitchen. And so again, we see this as that core a core piece of our mission and adding that value to the community. It's also one of those things that helps introduce people to the market, right? You might come for a cooking class and then feel more comfortable buying that piece of fish or buying that unique cut of meat after you've taken a class. It also allows us to really engage with school children. Ohio City is situated in a neighborhood that has had tremendous development, but also has an enormous amount of public housing. So this is a space where we can work with low-income residents or folks on nutrition education or thinking about how to do healthy meals on a budget. It's also a space where we've been working a little bit already with partners on food as medicine, right? So right now we have a small pilot that's been going the last couple years where folks can have their doctor prescribe them produce from the West Side Market that can assist them. It's with folks with type 2 diabetes. And so this would become a space where in addition to getting prescribed the produce from the market, we could actually have somebody teaching cooking classes on the market. So the teacher could lead them on how to buy the product at the market, then they could come up, learn how to cook it. And so these are really ways that we see the market being able to be more impactful in the community. I want to talk a little bit more broadly about the project. So we have a $70 million master plan to implement. We have a market with 60 small businesses that need to stay open. I only touched a little bit on the transition, but I came on board in January of 2024 as the first employee of the nonprofit. And I had about 4 months to hire a staff, work with Jessica at the city to finish negotiations, and transition the market to the nonprofit operation. In April, when we transitioned, we were gearing up to think about how to do fundraising. How are we going to do the implementation of this master plan? And we learned that, one of the funding sources that we were pursuing, New Markets tax credits, had changed some criteria. And we really had to get existing funding if we wanted to use that source of funding for the master plan, which we did. And that was a huge piece of the transition for the city, and why City Council ultimately approved the deal to allow us to manage the market was because the city was never going to be able to put together a $70 million project. They have so many needs. They own 200 buildings. For them to commit $70 million to get this done was too much. But instead, what they could do is they could put in some amount of money. So they put in about 23 million and allow us to then go out and leverage and seek other sources like tax credit financing that the city as a municipality wouldn't have qualified for. So I wanted to kind of delve in a little bit to some of the broader challenges of the project. And then I'm going to turn it over to Ken to talk a little bit more. Ken's team partnered with us as the nonprofit and with the city to think through the structuring of the deal. And so Ken will kind of walk through some of the challenges and things he's had to help think about with us in structuring the financial side of the deal. But just kind of talking through a few things. So I alluded to it, but like the timeline has been really intense because we found out about those tax credits, and it's critical that we leverage every funding opportunity. So thinking about how to do the project, assemble a team really quickly, has been one of the biggest challenges. I showed you the site a little bit, but we have a site with very little space around it. We have a parking lot, and then the whole neighborhood is built out. And so being able to make sure we're designing a project that respected neighborhood context, that continues to engage with the neighborhood, but also thinking about how do we get all these systems into this historic building when we can't put things on the roof and things like that. How do we use the small amounts of space around us? And then thinking about historic tax credits just posed a lot of interesting design challenges. Like how do you put 21st century amenities and 21st century infrastructure into a space that was never designed to have any of those things? We also are pursuing LEED certification because some of our funding sources required it, and because it's a good thing to do. And so again, thinking about you have a building that was doesn't have a lot of systems. How do you put in systems that are energy efficient enough? How do you ensure that there's efficiency in a building that's a third refrigeration? And then again, thinking about how do we improve accessibility? There's no elevators except for a couple freight elevators, no elevators in the building. So how do you get people up to the second floor? How do you respect the historic character, but still add an elevator? And then finally, budget constraints, right? 70 million is still a really large project and a really large lift. We need the budget to stay at 70, and it could easily go to 100 million if we wanted it to. So, thinking through all of those things with the planning team has been essential. Ken, I want you to kind of touch on the deal structuring and financing, and then we can talk about the solutions a little bit.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rosemary. Hi, everyone. Ken Kalinchuk with PMC. Like Rosemary, I have planning degrees also, and it's great to be back involved with APA. PMC was brought on about 2 years ago, about a year and a half before the financial closing of the tax credits, to help figure out, what are all these challenges that bringing historic and new market tax credits and other public grants to a city-owned project, which is leased to a nonprofit which doesn't have a history. How do you make that all work together? So I'm going to run through some of these challenges, and Rosemary and I will touch on some of the solutions that we came up with. First of all was the legal structure for tax credit compliance. The city of Cleveland proudly owns this building, and they did not want to give up full control, but they understood they needed to give up some control in order to secure various tax credits. So we ended up finding a way to structure a long-term lease, but we couldn't put that in place until the financial closing, which ended up being in mid-April of 25. So we had to identify a stopgap measure to allow the nonprofit and Rosemary, once she was hired, to take over the management. So that led us to help negotiate this management agreement, which was in place for about a year before the lease agreements could take hold in the financial closing. Guardrails for municipal comfort with the structure. The city had multiple priorities, including mainly getting the project done, helping stabilize the market and revenues, making sure CPMC had a successful business model when this was all done, as well as making sure that the project wasn't too rich for a nonprofit, and the city gave up, only what they needed to. So we had to develop a bunch of guardrails for support agreements and guarantees that protected the city while providing comfort for our tax credit investors. On the finance side, as Rosemary mentioned, this is a gentrifying, changing neighborhood with a lot of different pushes and pulls. Um, we had a unique situation where the new market tax credit eligibility changed kind of around the time that we got engaged, and we had to go back and find allocation from 22 or earlier, or else we wouldn't be eligible for new market tax credits moving forward. We were able to find that partner in Cleveland Development Advisors and their CDE here in Cleveland, who contributed $20 million allocation to the project, which ended up netting the deal $6 million through PNC investment. Layering the financial tax credits together and the strategies each need. New markets and historics have some conflicting requirements. The historics want, the full project to be funded, guaranteed that it'll be completed, have a guarantor in place, whereas the new markets is a little more flexible and wants a guarantee, but cares more about the community impacts. We had to find the right partners to be flexible with us and allow us to do the two-stage closing, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Rosemary mentioned the time crunch. The new market's deadline of closing by around year-end 24, spring of 25, gave Camille and the fundraising team at CPMC time and leverage to secure a lot of philanthropic commitments with a really tight deadline, and they did a great job. When you paired that up with the city commitment, we were able to convince the new market and historic investors that we had enough of a project here to generate the impacts and change needed for the long-term success of the market. And on the owner's rep side, that's another component of PMC. We provide legal, finance, and owner's rep services, validating costs and keeping the project in a feasible budget range, trying to figure out what the different stages could be depending on how much money was raised was one of the more fun parts of this, Rosemary. And that was something we helped the team do. And then working with a historic architect to secure National Park Service eligibility for all of the plans that have been brought up in the master plan. Go ahead. Oops.
Sorry, guys, I'm trying to unmute myself, and instead I'm going backwards on the slides. Sorry, but just want to talk about some of the solutions we came up with, which were, oh my gosh, it does not want me to do this. And so I think, the things that I would emphasize, and I can let Ken jump in a little bit more on some of those things, but I think really one, coming out of community development, I was used to everything being so bootstrapped and so grassroots. But I think realizing in this project that, we needed expertise that wasn't going to be permanent expertise on our team. This is, a one-shot project. We're not going to be doing tax credits 100 times in a row. So you need that expertise, but you need it and part of your team for the project, but you're not going to hire somebody whose specific background is all in tax credits, because you need that person to also manage the market and do all these things. And so really, I think what it came down to and why we've been able to get where we are so quickly is that we really did take the time to make sure we had the right partners and really say that, it is important to make sure you're paying for the services that are really critical, that bring the expertise you need to the table. And so I think, really having the right legal team in place that has a deep understanding of the tax credit structure. And then the city also committed to having, they didn't just use their internal law department. They also had an attorney with tax credit and with this kind of specialty like deal structuring background to help us negotiate everything. And then, from finance partners, Ken and his team do a great job. They do historic tax credit projects and new market tax credit projects all the time. So they have the relationships and things like that with the players that we needed so that we could bring those to the table quickly. And then thinking about the architects, engineers, and the construction partner, because our timeline was so crunched, for new markets tax credits, we had to have submitted our permit. So, in April when we found that out, we didn't have an architect on board yet, and so we really had to move really quickly, using our owner's rep and our team to make sure we had an RFP out, make sure we selected an architect quickly, and we brought that architect on in July. I think the other thing that was really critical is that because we were so committed to keeping the market open, is that we brought on our construction manager at risk, who is now our GC for the project. We brought them on in September, and that was essential because the logistics of how to do the project and the order in which we do the project really related to each other. So the way that the architects were designing the project had to relate to the way we could implement the project and really stage the project. And because of the complexity of it, we had to have the contractor on board for closing so that we could say, this is the order in which Ken kind of alluded to, like, this is the order that we can do the project. So maybe you want all of your revenue generating spaces to come on first in your first stage of financing, but that's not going to be possible because we won't be able to put any of the infrastructure in that's required to get to those spaces. So having all of those folks on board and working together, and I think what they asked of us is that, as owners, I think owners can be wishy-washy. They can take a long time to decide. I think having a nonprofit that was streamlined without a lot of bureaucracy, that's the other thing that made this possible, is that, the whole team had one point of contact, me. They could come to me and say, yes, no, maybe, what do you want to do? And sometimes I had to engage the board or things like that. But I was able to really commit to being in a meeting every week and saying yes really quickly. And that made a huge difference. I think the other things was just everybody kind of knew the speed. And so all the project partners kind of committed to us being that primary focus for those 6 months. And then finally, I guess I would just say, I think as planners, one of the things that, can happen is if you don't have the right municipal support at all levels of government, it can be really hard. So even if your planning department or even if your economic development department is into something, if you don't have like broader municipal support for something, having Jessica and a single point of contact and having the mayor committing a person whose job it was to work through City Hall and coordinate getting yeses from everybody at City Hall, because it was like one of their key strategies. I think that also made all the difference in the world. And, I think if you're trying to look at a project like this and moving quickly, thinking about as a municipality, like if you want something to get done, you've got to commit the human capital to doing it as well. Ken, do you want to share anything more about what you felt like worked or allowed this to move forward so quickly?
Yeah, the community buy-in and municipal buy-in really helped. Everyone was willing to stretch a little past their comfort zone and take their lumps and move a little bit further than they otherwise would for a standard deal to make this happen. Rosemary, the pressure of the new market tax credits really helped. Without that deadline, who knows where we'd be in fundraising and closing and starting construction, because this might have moved on the standard speed of business or municipal government, which is even longer. And we might not be in this great place we are today. But definitely having the right team, having buy-in from all the parties, people being willing to be flexible in their requirements really helped here.
Now kind of just want to delve in a little bit more. I know we shared that the total project cost is 70 million, but wanted to dig in a little bit more on our sort of capital stack and where we are today. So Ken has been alluding to that April 2025 closing. And so what you see on the left-hand side is that first like $50 to $52 million closing that we had in April of 2025 and the funding sources that went into it. So really, we tried for the first round to tap into the lowest, I guess the lowest hanging fruit, not just the least complicated, but we wanted to go, when we went to philanthropic partners, we really wanted folks, and before we went out to the individual community, we really wanted folks to see that the full breadth of the region was behind us. And so I think that's where you see we have city support, we have county support, we have state support. The Port Authority for Cleveland also came in, the state brownfields. We actually also had a federal commitment from our Senator Sherrod Brown before he lost re-election. So, we had every layer of government saying this is an important project, this is a priority for getting it done. And I think that also helped tax credit investors see that like this has really broad support and is something people care about. And then, I think we have some very key, the Connor Foundation, George Gunn Foundation, Key Bank. Those are some of the, most visible and critical philanthropic members of the greater Cleveland community. And so having them come in as early leads also helped everyone get comfortable with the project as well. And so right now we've got about the second stage that is about 18 million left to raise. We have a $5 million request for the state historic tax credits that we'll find out in December. That would yield about $4 million to the project. We have some applications into larger foundations like the Cleveland Foundation that we should hear back on this year. And then there's also additional federal tax credits that will come into the project should we hit that 18 million or $16 million milestone, and they'd come in with another 2 million. And so the remainder, that bulk of 10 to 12 million outside of those sources are really just, Camille and me and our board really going through finding the philanthropic sources that are required. I think we're in a really unique situation in that everybody has known the market for 113 years and it's beloved, but because it was a municipal asset, unlike other museums or other, sort of Cleveland treasures, people were never asked to directly support it outside of using it like a grocery store. And so I think one of the biggest pieces of Camille's work, and she could speak to it maybe a little bit more, is just how do you start transitioning people's mindset to understand that this is not a municipally operated institution anymore, and for its future to be bright, the community has to come together and say we really value this thing, and we're gonna put our money into it, and we're gonna put our time and energy into it. I don't know, Camille or Ken, do you want to touch on this part of the financing at all a little bit more?
Yeah, I'll just add that, one of the really unique things about being a part of the market is even if you have a brand new nonprofit, let's say, and you're educating people around your mission and your programming and, what they can then support through financial giving. The interesting thing here is that people can support both the nonprofit, right? And the project that we've just been talking about. And we still have quite a ways to go, right? We're raising that final $18 million. We need our community to support that side of things. But the reality is we're a market. So we have 60 small businesses on site that people spend their dollars at as well. And so they're used to doing that. But again, Rosemary mentioned they're not used to necessarily giving philanthropically to this institution. And so getting people to really see that they can do both and how both are impactful for the market in creating a sustainable future has been really crucial for us.
I also wanted to add on the historic tax credit side, it was really key in these larger financings where you have multiple tax credit sources. You can't really close on some sources of financing and send them to the project and then close others because it's all one box of interwoven legal agreements. I think there's, 80 documents, Rosemary, and like the appendix of the main agreements here. You can't just close and then open and close and then open. It's going to be too costly and cause a lot of delays. So it was so important here once we had a new markets tax credit commitment to find a historic investor willing to commit to the smaller amount of the first 50 million of the project and then increase the rest. And then, by the way, close without the permits in place. And PPG and managed by consortium became that great partner for us. We're very lucky to have figured out how to do that this year.
And then I thought for planners might be interested in some of the like project constraints. So you can see here the yellow is highlighted. That's West 25th Street and Lorraine Avenues. They're two very busy commercial corridors. Lorraine Avenue spans the entire west side of Cleveland and actually kind of spans the east side of Cleveland as well. The Lorraine Carnegie Bridge connects them, and then Carnegie takes you all the way to the east side, becomes Cedar Hill, and goes actually all the way into the eastern suburbs. And Lorraine stretches as all the way out to the far west suburbs. So this is really like the main thoroughfare of all of Northeast Ohio, and West 25th Street as well. It goes all the way from the lake south, becomes Pearl Road, all the way through into southern suburbs. So this intersection is really critical, but it also means that logistically, again, it can be really challenging. You can see our loading dock access. We have 60 small businesses. Some businesses are bringing in, whole sides of cow. Some businesses are bringing 18 or 20 lambs in at a time. Bakery trucks, all kinds of things. We have pallet jacks and motorized things loading pallets of produce. And so thinking about how is the construction team going to be able to do this job is really interesting, and maintain public access to the market as well as like merchant access to critical areas. And so I just kind of wanted to show this picture. You can see, but on the right of the North Arcade, there is where we're going to have to put some utilities, actually build a utility yard, because we can't fit those things into the market and they can't go on the roof. And so I thought this is a really interesting picture to kind of show how tight the site is, and the logistics that everyone's facing as we move through that. And then finally, I just thought we would touch on, and I'll turn it over to Camille here in a second, to just kind of touch on living our mission now. While we have this major project, we didn't want to tell people, hey, the reason the nonprofit's here is to do this project. And by the way, we're also mission oriented. One day we'll get to all of those things. We felt like it was really critical to be able to deliver on some of that right away. So I'm going to kind of turn it over to Camille to start talking about that. And then Camille, I actually have to jump off. And so I appreciate everyone being here today. And Ken and Camille are going to stick around for as long as desired to kind of talk through the mission piece of it, and also talk through any questions that you guys may have. So thanks for inviting me, and Ken and Camille. I'm putting you in trusty hands. I'm going to stop sharing. Camille, if you want to pull up this slide and just kind of finish it out.
Rosemary, getting lots of claps. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, I'm sharing now. Let's see. And there we go. Okay. So obviously Rosemary kind of teed us up for what are we doing now as a nonprofit and from a mission lens to really deliver preemptive to this project actually being completed. So, one of the challenges that the market historically had is through city management, there was no one on site at the market who was actually focused on and dedicated to marketing the market. And so one of the perks of our team is we have a marketing director on site. And so really communicating with the public about the market was a crucial first step for us. When we took over management, there were, I think, 2 marketing use photos available. And so one of the first things we did was bring photographers in to get, incredible photos of this historic space to be able to share far and wide. And, one of the initial projects that our marketing director worked on was our Fresh from the Market newsletter. So this is a monthly newsletter that goes out. And in our first year, we created some really original content to share out with the public, including a chef series. We partnered with local chefs, including folks who are pretty well known in Cleveland, like Chef Doug Katz and Chef Vinny Semino. And what they did is we filmed them coming to the market, sourcing their ingredients from the market, and then ultimately going back to their kitchen at their restaurants here in Cleveland and cooking up a recipe that to them represented Westside Market, all while sharing their own stories about how the market impacted them as chefs. We did an array of merchant features. So, of course, over the years, merchants have been featured in public media, but it was really special for us to tell merchant stories from the inside. And you're welcome to sign up for that newsletter. It is on our website, westsidemarket.org. You just scroll all the way down on that initial homepage and you can sign up there. I mentioned it is monthly, so we don't spam you. And I hope you'll enjoy the content that comes out through that. Another program to mention, Rosemary already talked about Produce RX, which is our food as medicine program that we've piloted. But another program we've worked on in conjunction with FAIR, which is another local nonprofit called Food Access Raises Everyone, is a produce perks program. So it's a state vouchers for folks who qualify through the TANF program, so temporary assistance for needy families. These are all families with low incomes. And so through Produce Perks, they can qualify for vouchers for free produce. And we do 2 to 3 of these sessions each year where we hand out about $70,000 worth of vouchers each time. And that amount has varied over the years as more funding or less funding has come to this program. But what we know through this program at the market is that people with low incomes, people, of course, in general across Cleveland, but especially people with low incomes in this program see the market as their grocery store. We have the highest redemption rate for this program in the state. We are always roughly around 95% of those vouchers are redeemed here at the market, with the next highest redemption rates being in the 60% marks. And so looking at additional programming and pop-ups, we did an array of pop-up events, monthly pop-ups where we invited in other local businesses that are not currently at the market, predominantly non-food-based businesses. Of course, the market is all food-based, but using some of our vacancy on site to be able to uplift additional small businesses in the area was really special. Our very first summer managing, we had a smaller version of what our future courtyard will be. We actually painted the asphalt in the alleyway and put out tables and chairs. There was seating for roughly 40. And it was really special. We had a number of guests who, just remarked about how this was a dream come true. They had always wished that the market had seating. And actually, it's one of our top complaints that we don't have enough or really any seating. And so providing seating was a way for our team to show an early win and deliver upon our charge through the transformation project. This year, we collaborated with Central Kitchen, which is a local nonprofit that helps incubate small food businesses. They actually have a kitchen on site at their building, a commercial kitchen, for small businesses to rent out and use to produce their goods. And so we have had 2 stands dedicated to Central Kitchen all year, where businesses that work through their commercial kitchen have then had the opportunity to sell on site at the market and experience what it's like to have the access to the reach of Westside Market. So, for the last several years, we've had 800,000 plus visitors. This year, we are projecting that we will top 1 million visitors. And so being able to provide that reach for other businesses that are just getting off the ground or some have been very well established here in Cleveland, to have another platform to share. And then finally, fundraising, right? So that's most of my job is fundraising. And we're working hard on the last $18 million. But for anyone who is familiar with fundraising, you know that typically you go through a quiet phase of your campaign. And we kind of joke that we were the loudest quiet phase in all of the city, because the reality is, while we weren't asking the general public for dollars just yet, everyone knew we were fundraising. And so we did officially just go public in the last few weeks. And we are officially taking public gifts. You're welcome to learn more about our campaign at the website listed here, transformationproject.westsidemarket.org. There are an array of construction updates and really special videos and storytelling about the market. And we continue to add to that website. But going public has been a huge milestone for us because there has been a lot of educating in the last year and a half, getting folks in the door, taking tours. Rosemary and myself, Ken, all speaking with groups of people, trying to spread the word about what we are trying to accomplish here at the Westside Market. And you know, getting someone to give to a brand new nonprofit, regardless of the fact that they know and love the Westside Market, is a huge first step. It can be very challenging to get someone to give that initial gift. Often they have to hear about your mission or the work you're doing 6 or 7 times before they officially press the donate button. And so we are having really special response thus far to our public campaign, and we're looking forward to, raising that last 18 million. And do you have anything else you wanted to share there too?
Not at this time, but if you love public spaces, public markets, and historic rehabs and feel compelled to help make this phase 2 a reality, please check out that website and give what you can. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Now, Christine, I think we're entering the Q&A section now. Will you be managing questions, or should we go through the online Q&A?
Oh, I can do that. So folks, again, if you have questions, just type them into that Q&A box and we'll do our best to answer them. So the first one, I'm just gonna scooch back here. Okay. So it says, I moved 14 years ago. I shopped here every week. I miss it. Given the dynamic nature of the Ohio City Tremont neighborhoods, are they working with local restaurants for being the new food vendors? And I guess I want to add to that, if for those that aren't aware of the space immediately around the market, can you talk a little bit about that, and kind of what that vibe is, what that environment is, and then all of the incredible restaurants around the area, and kind of answer through that question?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a fun question. Cleveland is kind of this hidden gem for food that people don't realize. I've lived in 4 different states, and of those 4, Cleveland just has the most magical food scene. There's a lot of camaraderie here around food, and chefs who, maybe have gone away for education, but have ended up coming back to Cleveland and building out their concepts. And so here in Ohio City, right directly around the Westside Market, the area has changed a lot in the last 30, 40 years. And I will say the cool thing about Ohio City from a food perspective is we're home to a number of breweries in the city. So Great Lakes Brewing Company is a pretty well-known one, even outside of Cleveland. But we are home to Great Lakes. Market Garden Brewery is another one. And then, of course, have another, an array of other breweries around town, as well as local restaurants, both here on West 25th, on Lorraine, and then in other parts of Ohio City, like there's pocket neighborhoods like Hingetown that have, an array of, we're talking James Beard nominated chefs, for example. So, Larder Delicatessen is a business here in Hingetown in Ohio City that has James Beard nominated chefs, James Beard awarded, pastry chef. And so just really magical space for food. And most of those people will boast that they actually shop at the Westside Market for many of their seasonal ingredients. And so another area just across the bridge, if you look to downtown Cleveland, East 4th Street, has an array of restaurants, including one called Cordelia, another James Beard nominated chef, Vinny Cimino, and they actually exclusively source their seafood from Kate's Fish at the Westside Market. So if you ever go to Cordelia, you will literally see a menu item that says Kate's Fish of the day. So really well-connected chefs in the area know and love the market. And I think that's a testament to the quality of food that you're getting when you come to the market, and as well getting to experience around the city. And then, just to, obviously I answered the question in the chat already. Sorry, Christine, I jumped the gun. But, our focus is to keep that local feel. We are not looking to welcome in local or national chains, excuse me. That's the first concern most people have when they hear about this part of the project. They're like, there's going to be, let's say, a Starbucks, right? Like that is not ever going to be our goal or intention. We are looking to curate a really neat array of businesses, whether it's local well-known chefs, like I mentioned, who are going to create a new fast casual concept, or newer entrepreneurs, right? Like people who've still gone to culinary school perhaps, but have never had a fast casual concept, have never maybe even had a storefront. But ultimately that reflect our city as a whole.
Thank you. So this next question, does the neighborhood commercial area have a Main Street type organization that's working in the area? And maybe talk a little bit about how Cleveland in particular has a situation where we have many CDCs, and talk a little bit about Ohio City Inc. and kind of if they play a part in that, and any other kind of Main Street program that anyone has started talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Ohio City Inc. is a great partner of ours. Pretty early on in taking over management, we've been in pretty consistent contact with Ohio City Inc. So Ohio City Inc. is the community development corporation here, and they often refer to the West Side Market area as the Market District. And so that is definitely a focus of the work they're doing. How can we uplift this area? We've mentioned West 25th Street a number of times, but this really is a drag of, local businesses, local oriented places. And so Ohio City is always looking at how can they be the best partner they can be. The other thing I'll mention is the original space of the West Side Market. So before we had this grand building and structure, there was a market on this corner of the city. It was just across the street, and it was an open air market that Rosemary touched on, right? So Pearl Street Market was across the street. Well, that space is now Market Square Park. There's an array of seating options over there, as well as this is the most trafficked bus stop outside of downtown Cleveland. So this intersection sees the heaviest bus traffic outside of downtown Cleveland Public Square. And so Ohio City Inc. is thinking really creatively, looking to next year, especially about how to program that park, and how does that park, collaborate and benefit the market and vice versa. And how do we uplift that park as a space for Ohio City residents to enjoy, as well as visitors to Ohio City? But Ken, you might have additional thoughts here too.
Yeah, Camille, I believe their OCI runs a SID, a special improvement district, with a clean and safe program that also really helps maintain and keep this area feeling vibrant and safe throughout the year, including our snowy winters.
Does the Downtown Cleveland Alliance, the people in the yellow jackets, I see them there, right? Do they kind of, or am I imagining it?
No, they do not cross over the bridge, but the program that Ken mentioned is like our version of that. So they wear red jackets.
Red jackets. Okay. I love that. Okay. And when we were talking about like that corner park area and the bus traffic, that's a perfect segue into another question regarding walking and biking to the market. The question is there a large residential population to support that foot traffic, specifically in getting there? I noticed parking lots surrounding the market, yet wondered the market capture was for people that just simply walk or bike.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So one of the things we always talk about is the West Side Market is really a truly accessible space from a transportation perspective. I mentioned the bus traffic, but right across the street, we actually have a red line station as well, which is a rapid transit station that folks can use to get from other parts of the city, as well as, of course, bike and walking traffic. There is a building directly across the street, across Lorraine Avenue, that has hundreds of housing units in it. That is actually a newer building. It opened in, I believe, 2022. And so there are a number of residents in that building who, of course, we are the closest grocery store to them. And so on top of the fact that Rosemary mentioned, there are hundreds of units of public housing here in Ohio City as well. One of those buildings is just down the road, about a block from the market. And so we are a very accessible space. What we find, though, is that because Cleveland as a whole is very driving heavy, the parking lots are an essential part of market visitorship. We have two lots, one directly behind the market and one kind of right next to the produce arcade area. And on a weekend, the lots are full, and the rotation through those lots is pretty consistent. We have 90 minutes free parking while the market is open to encourage people to come and actually just do grocery shopping. But beyond 90 minutes, we do charge. It is still a reasonable rate. It's $1.50 an hour. And then if you're here after 5 p.m., it's $6 flat rate, unless there's a special event going on. So it's still some of the most reasonable parking that you're going to get in the city of Cleveland, or really in most cities. But we do have that free time frame to encourage people to shop here. Parking is not inhibited too much by the project outside of what Rosemary mentioned with the utility yard that has to go in. That takes away a number of parking spaces. I believe it's maybe 8 or 10. So it's not a huge dent in the parking, but it's a necessary part of the project. The other thing is that prior to taking over management of the market, the parking revenue did not come back to the market. It actually it went to the city's budget. And so part of our negotiation process for our management agreement was that we were not taking over management of the market without the parking revenue benefiting the market. And so people can at least feel good when they pay their money to park, that money is going right into keeping the market going for the next 100 years. And then the last thing I'll say is that we mentioned residential development. Obviously, I mentioned a new building across the street, but there's a lot of other development here in this area as well, with other nonprofits and, public goods in general. So just down the road, we have the Ohio City Farm, which is an urban farm run by refugees in the city. And so managed by Resource Cleveland, another nonprofit. And they just actually built a space out over there to help uplift their folks as entrepreneurs. And our hope from a partnership perspective is when they have helped people get off the ground with the concept, they could potentially move into the West Side market, and we could be an incubator space, right, for folks to scale up their business and really again, have the access to the audience. And beyond the farm, there's another project happening in Cleveland with Irishtown Bend Park. So there's a part of our city that basically, if they didn't stabilize this hillside, it could have all just fallen into the the river and would have blocked barge traffic and all kinds of, trade and, things that are economically beneficial to our
We've been
city.
talking about that, like even 10 years ago when I was in grad school, and like we were talking about it, that it has been a very long process to get that sucker stabilized.
Yes. And so they have been, stabilizing that hillside, but in doing that, they're also adding in a number of like walking trails, and they're going to make it a really welcoming park space. And we see that I think will play hand in hand with the market. The more people who come to explore Irishtown Bend will likely stop at the market to do some shopping or eat some lunch, and vice versa.
Great. A couple questions about the 60 vendors. The first one is, how has the perception been from the 60 vendors in regard to all of the updates? And I guess maybe also mention briefly the Tenants Association and kind of how they work with you and the city.
Yeah, it's a great question. So there is a Tenants Association. All of our businesses on site pay dues to the Tenants Association. And then there is a board of individuals, all business owners here at the West Side Market, who really advocate for the needs of the tenants. And, historically, that group was really valuable to the West Side Market because they were dedicated and focused on the market, right? Whereas, again, city management has 200 plus buildings to manage. And so over the years, the Tenants Association has done everything from There was a point back in like the 70s when the Tenants Association kind of helped rally folks to pay money to save the clock tower, which is a really neat part of our structure. And the clock could have been lost. It needed repairs, of course, over the years. So they raised about $1 million to do that. But the Tenants Association is also a vital part of why the nonprofit is managing the market today. So back in 2012, when the market had its centennial, that was the initial discussion around moving to nonprofit management. And the Tenants Association has definitely been an encouraging group and supportive group. Now, inevitably, when you're managing a building and you're renting space to 60 businesses, all have different interests, all have different needs and wants. There's going to be conflict along the way. And so I think the good thing about the time we've been managing the market is we are here focused on this building, focused on their businesses. We want them to succeed. And so being able to have really frank conversations and a really transparent line of communication has been essential. Inevitably, you're not going to win everybody. It just is what it is, right? So of the 60 businesses, I would say the vast majority are very supportive of the work we're doing, especially now that we are seeing construction on site. Pre-having construction, most of our vendors would have said, well, we'll believe it when we see it, because there have been a lot of promises over the years that just unfortunately were not kept. And so we could tell them all we wanted that we were raising money. We could tell them all we wanted that there were plans being put together. But until we actually had groundbreaking in May, I think many of them didn't believe it was going to happen. And so we've definitely seen a shift in dynamics since May in showing that we are delivering on what we say we're going to deliver on. And then the last thing I'll mention is just inevitably, we have businesses here who have been here 5 years. We have businesses who have been here 40 years. So there are business owners who we're seeing generationally, and this isn't just the West Side market, this is nationally, we're seeing small business owners, predominantly, let's say baby boomers, who are looking to retire, right? And their kids don't want to take over their businesses. They don't have somebody to take over their business. And so we are seeing a bit of transition with businesses who don't have someone to take over the business. And we're helping them navigate versus just completely closing down their business. Can we help facilitate you selling your business to an employee? Can we help facilitate introductions? If you know you're going to retire in 5 years, can we help you find an apprentice now who will learn the ins and outs of your business, who will be passionate about it, and can carry on your legacy here at the market? So all of this is a part of the work we're doing.
So I'm sure a couple folks will giggle on the line when I say this, but the question is, have there been any public critics of the project in connection with the changing demographics of the neighborhood or along any other lines? And kind of how is that playing out? And I always, in situations like this, I use the example of someone will say, will you fix the potholes before you do this, please? Because everything comes from the same pot of money, of course. So I guess to that, what kind of pushback are you seeing? What are the critics saying? Is the idea of a market gone? Is it, should we just close the door on it and move on? What are the critics saying about all this?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the challenges here in Cleveland is when the West Side market was originally created, there were 3 public markets as a part of the plan for the market. So there was a downtown market called Central Market, and then there was an East Side market as well. And, over the years, Central Market closed about 40 years ago, downtown, and just no longer exists. And for anyone who's been to Cleveland, they know there are other structures downtown, like the arcades, where, they're not necessarily all food businesses, but they are small business oriented. And I think one of the biggest criticisms we get is, why are you spending the money on West Side Market versus perhaps uplifting East Side Market? East Side Market has had iterations over the years and has had challenges, and I think the biggest answer to that is we would be remiss to let a building like this fall completely into disrepair and be unused. And so East Side Market does not have a structure like the West Side Market does. And West Side Market's not only from a visitor perspective, but also from that historic landmark perspective. A building like this cannot sit empty and then be brought back. It's the kind of building that if you let it fall to disrepair, if you allowed businesses to leave and didn't fill those spaces, it could be lost forever. And so that, I think, was a huge part of why the city was willing to make some of the concessions that Ken talked about, right? Like giving up the control they needed to give up in order for the nonprofit to take over management. But it's also why the folks on my team are here, right? So I think another criticism I would say we get, and some on the call might even know about this, is about parking. So up until about a decade ago, parking at the West Side Market was completely free. The city moved it to 90 minutes free and then payment after that. There was a gate system prior to us taking over management. And we pretty quickly took away those gates and shifted parking a bit. And I think people saw that as a pretty rapid change. And I think my team would agree that it was. But I think the thing people don't realize and why it was necessary is the gates were costing more than you would realistically want to spend, knowing that you need that revenue to support the market. So, I think Rosemary mentioned it, but I'll say it again. The market has operated at a $500,000 to $1 million deficit annually for more than a decade. And so if our team does not focus on filling that gap, because ultimately the city doesn't want to cover that gap for too long, right? They'll do it for the remainder of us fundraising for the project. But our team has to focus on revenue generation. And I can't think of, many cities around the country where you don't have to pay something for some kind of parking. And so the fact that we even have a free window is, I think a testament to how special the market is and how special it is for people to be able to access it.
Thanks. A renovation like this, where, for instance, there's ADA issues immediately, there's coolers that aren't working, there's flooding going on in the basement, all the things, plus, you're trying to attract new business and do all the things. So how do you phase this renovation and prioritize what you prioritize? And how long do we plan on this taking? And is it partially dependent on how much money you're going to raise, or how much, more capital you're going to get, or where do you even begin to think about how to process it and put it into buckets?
Yeah, I'll let Ken take the lead on this one, and then I can jump in.
Yeah, there were definitely conflicting priorities. The nonprofit itself really wanted to implement these new revenue generating spaces, the event space, the North Arcade redevelopment, the teaching kitchen, et cetera. But the city was really focused on their money going towards their own deferred maintenance and the structure. And really what it came down to is a multi-month, multi-party negotiation, discussion of what made sense for the contractor to reduce costs. And it kind of started with, you start at the bottom, you got the basement, you replace all the infrastructure and the coolers, and then you go up from there generally. The East Arcade was also really easy to do in the first stage because produce vendors could be moved to the other arcade. You could get that done, consolidate all of them into that space, I think early next year, Camille, and then we'll be able to do the North Arcade redevelopment. Generally, the stage one work will be a full 2 years. So it started roughly this summer around June, July, will be complete by fall of 27. Stage two, all these last spaces, the North Arcade, the event space, once we're fully fundraised, that will probably be latter half of 26 and then all of 27. So we're really focused right now on, okay, will we have 6 million? Will we have 10 million? Will we have 12 million to release the next 4 or 5 scopes of work from the contractors? They can pre-order the generator, order the equipment, and then have it ready in time to do the work. And then from there, how do we get the last dollars in to complete those last few scopes in 27. So it's a fun mix of priorities.
Yeah, and I will say from a business perspective, a huge priority was keeping all of our businesses open throughout the entire project. So this was not a project where even if you could, if construction could get done in, let's say, 2 months, you can't shut a place like this down for 2 months. Too many of our businesses will go under and not actually be able to return. We saw this during the pandemic. So the market was closed for about 6 weeks during the pandemic, and there were many businesses that did not return to the market for, of course, a number of reasons, but revenue is a huge part of that. And so keeping all of our businesses open throughout the entire project has been key. And having some vacancy on site, we don't have a ton of vacancy, but we have just enough, I would say, that it allows for us to keep all of our businesses open. We can move them into swing spaces while we're working on things like HVAC in the market hall in the coming year. And so that 18 million that we keep talking about is really, if we can raise that 18 million smoothly and quickly, and there's no hiccups with construction, which of course we all know, you never know what you're going to get when you're doing construction. The goal is to be done by the end of 2027.
Some more basic logistical questions about the market itself. One is, what are the hours and days of operation? Is it 7 days a week? Is it at 6 a.m.? That. And then secondly, there was another question about what is the footprint? What is the square footage of the market itself? And how big are the stalls? And, do people have more than one stall? And
yeah, great. Okay. I'll start with the easy one, Christine. So the easy one is the hours of operation and days. We are open 5 days a week. So we are only closed on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I can talk about that here in a second. We are open 5 days a week. It's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., and then Sundays from 10 to 4. Historically, when Central Market was downtown, they were actually open on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we were open on Mondays and Wednesdays. And so it was like a historical courtesy that we did not overlap with them in those weekdays. So if somebody needed goods for their dinner on Monday night, they knew they could come to the West Side Market. If somebody knew they needed goods on Tuesday, they could go to Central Market. But historically, the West Side Market was also not open on Sundays. So for most of its history, it was open 4 days a week. In the last 12 years, they decided to open on Sundays. And the biggest concern by merchants was, we are going to lose half of our visitorship on Saturday, and they're going to shift to Sunday. And it's not actually going to benefit us from a revenue perspective. It's just going to spread people out over the weekend. And they realized pretty quickly that that is not how this works. When other public markets have added on a day like a Sunday, what you actually see is that you get a brand new audience. And so Saturday, you're going to see more tourists here at West Side Market, right? People who have come in for the weekend, or maybe they've come home for the weekend and they're visiting on Saturday, versus Sunday with those shorter hours. And, frankly, Sunday's a different feel of the day, right? You're getting ready for the next week. So we see a lot more grocery shoppers. We see a lot more young families. So it's a much easier day. As somebody who has 2 children who are little, it's much easier to bring them on a Sunday than it is on a Saturday. And so anyway, that's the logistics there as far as when you can visit. And then remind me the other question, Christine.
Yes. The question was, what is the footprint of the market itself, and kind of how big are the stalls and how that works?
Yeah, this is one of those questions that typically when Rosemary and I present, Rosemary takes this question. So I'll do my best to answer it. The basement, for example, runs the whole span of the market hall and beyond into the alleyway, a little bit underneath the dock area even. So really beyond what you're seeing from a footprint perspective with the market hall itself. The basement is roughly 25,000, between 25 and 30,000 square foot of storage space. And that also has structures like electrical, plumbing, our glycol system, all of that in the basement. The market hall is a bit smaller than that. I would say in that 20 to 25,000 square foot range. And then you've got the spaces like the arcade. The North Arcade is a 10,000 square foot space, and the East Arcade is, roughly half of that. And so when our businesses are renting space at the market, they are renting by square foot. And all of our spaces at the market are just a little different. The arcades are pretty uniform in how they are structured, but inside the market hall, all of the spaces vary. And the other thing that they're doing when they're renting a space, they're renting by square foot, but they're also renting based on the product that they have and the needs of that product. So, folks all of our butchers, for example, right? They are renting their space to sell their meat in the market hall, but they're also renting their storage space in the basement. And their storage space includes butchering space. So 90% of the meat you're going to buy here at the Westside Market is butchered on site at the market. We talk about it being the freshest meat you're going to get in the city. Typically, they're wheeling a half a cow in on a Thursday. They're butchering it up and you're buying the meat on Friday. And so it doesn't have all the preservatives and things in it that you would have at the grocery store. So it varies based on business from a rental perspective. But I hope that helps a little bit. Again, Rosemary would usually take that question.
That's fine. What other opportunities from a funding perspective are there? Are there other like historic preservation type funding opportunities? Are there accessibility funding opportunities or school programs? What other unique kind of out there opportunities are there?
I'll start with tax credits and then turn it over to Camille. So as Rosemary mentioned, we just applied in September for a $5 million Ohio Historic Preservation Tax Credit Award. We're feeling very good about our chances given the competitive scoring and the funding available. Announcements should be made the week of December 15th. We're hoping for good news. And in the market with investors, we're hoping that could be monetized at around $4 million after you bridge the credit for 2 years. There's also in Ohio a really unique program called the Ohio Opportunity Zone Tax Credit. We were able to qualify a few of the private investments for that. It's a one-time 10% income tax credit on equity invested into projects, and that's something we'll look to utilize throughout the project as additional private money comes in.
Yeah, and then from a philanthropic perspective, we're really open to anything and everything. There are so many ways that the market aligns with, for example, family foundations and their impact goals and their missions, right? Like, we do food access programming, we do food as medicine programming, but we're also a space for entrepreneurship, for small business, for, thousands of school children that come through the market every year. We kind of have this running joke that, and it's true, frankly, there's nowhere on site right now to gather school children. And so when field trips show up, the school bus drops them off and they kind of run amok in the market hall. Usually they buy their cake pops and their hot sauce and things like that. But they're not actually learning all that they could learn about the market. So a definite goal of the future spaces like the event space is to be able to gather field trips up there and teach them about the local food economy and talk to them about entrepreneurship and bring our businesses up to those spaces and teach about their products and about their stories and how they got where they are today. So there's definitely funding out there for all of those things. You mentioned accessibility. We have actually accessed some accessibility dollars already through our Cuyahoga County Board of Developmental Disabilities. They have a funding stream to help support things like a universal changing station on site, which we did receive funding for. They also have provided some funding to us for some of our ADA accessible doors that will need replaced. Part of the project is replacing all of the doors, and several of our doors are ADA accessible. So yeah, we're kind of looking to any and all avenues for philanthropy at this point. Ranging from the $25 gift, which again, we just recently started asking people for, all the way to folks like the George Gunn Foundation, who came in really early on with a $3 million plus gift. So.
I think we can probably hit up one more question here, and this one is kind of uh, surrounding the event spaces that you talked about, envisioning, kind of like test kitchen, learning to cook type things, and the previous the men's locker room and turning that into event space. So to that, I guess, one of the things that's trending now are shared kitchen spaces or things like co-ops have always obviously been a thing, but have there been any discussions about creating some type of co-op or shifting kind of how those funds come to be, or creating shared kitchens, or just trying
Yeah.
to bring in additional, not so much philanthropic, but like just everyday revenue?
Yeah, absolutely. So, right now, the West Side Market does not have a kitchen on site. So, a huge barrier to entry for businesses is they have to have a separate commercial kitchen to actually build their product and create their product in. So, anything you see at the West Side Market that is prepared in any way, baked goods, even marinated meats, all of that is done offsite. Some of our businesses have storefronts of their own that actually have kitchens in them, but many of them rent commercial kitchen space elsewhere. And then they have to have transportation to actually bring those goods at temperature to the market. And so part of the plan is we talked about the teaching kitchen, right? So that space is going to be predominantly programmatic. We're looking at partnerships with our local community college to do culinary coursework, and partner with our local chefs to do date night cooking classes, and other things that can generate revenue. We can have K through 12 students in there learning about food in any capacity you can think of, basically. But another really cool part of the project, and Rosemary may have mentioned it when she was talking about the basement, is in re-envisioning the footprint of the basement and making it a more efficient use of space down there. We're actually able to add in a commercial kitchen. And so we're going to go from 0 kitchens to 2 kitchens. And the commercial kitchen is actually going to have 2 fully built out kitchen spaces in it that will be rentable. And so we view that as another revenue stream, of course. We view that as lowering the barrier to entry for new businesses to the market, as well as for businesses on site who, if we have a really busy Saturday, somebody could sell out of their product at 3 p.m. and then have to close and miss out on 2 hours of really prime time for revenue. And in having a commercial kitchen on site, somebody could rent that space downstairs and know that at noon, if they hit a certain point with their product, they can run down there, create new product, bring it up, sell for those last 2 hours of the day, and really help scale their business. We are open to partnerships and collaborations with other organizations as well. I mentioned Resource Cleveland. But this is where our heads are at currently with the project. And I'm sure that even as these spaces, get fully fleshed out, I can just see how these will evolve and the number of opportunities we'll have to use them in unique ways.
Ooh, this is exciting. So we're going to have you back on here in a couple of years to show us the progress that was made and all of the great programming that's going on. This is great. So thank you both, and Rosemary out there, for joining us. This is a really great, cool project. And thank you for sharing all of the things. And folks, don't forget to log your SAM credits. A couple people messaged and said they were able to. I'm still not able to, but give it a whirl. And don't forget to visit our website to register for upcoming sessions, ohioplanning.org/planning webcast. So thanks, everyone. Thanks again to our speakers. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk next time. Bye, everybody.
Thanks so much,
everyone.
everybody.
Bye.